Dear viewers, prepare yourselves for a tale unlike any other, a mystery, woven with superstition, deception, and a dazzling jewel that holds more than just monetary value, a diamond that has traveled through centuries, whispered about in hushed tones, said to bring ruin to whoever possesses it. Tonight we unravel the enigma of the Western Star, a tale by none other than the Queen of Mystery herself, Agatha Christie. Before we step into the shadows of this intriguing case, take a moment to imagine a woman draped in elegance, her eyes betraying a secret fear. In her trembling hands she clutches a letter, its contents chilling enough to make even the bravest soul falter. Somewhere in the distance, unseen eyes watch her every move. But is it paranoia, or has something truly sinister begun to unfold? This story was first published in 1923. During the era when Agatha Christie was cementing her status as a master of detective fiction. The adventure of the Western Star blends logic with superstition, pulling readers into a world where reality and myth intertwine. At its heart lies an age-old belief: cursed jewels. These gleaming stones, steeped in history, have long been associated with misfortune and intrigue. And in this case, one such jewel, the Western Star, becomes the centerpiece of a mystery so enthralling that even the great Hercule Poirot must tread carefully. The morning was crisp, the air humming with the sounds of a city coming to life. In a quiet London apartment, Detective Hercule Poirot sat comfortably, lost in thought, while his friend and loyal companion, Captain Hastings, stood by the window idly observing the street below. Suddenly, Hastings stiffened, his keen eyes locked onto a scene unfolding before him. "That's odd," he murmured under his breath. Poirot, ever alert, raised an eyebrow. "What is it, mon ami?" he asked in his usual measured tone. Hastings leaned forward. "See for yourself, Poirot." A woman dressed immaculately, draped in fur, walking slowly, glancing up at every house as if searching for something. But she's not alone. Behind her, 3 men and a middle-aged woman follow at a careful distance, and now, an errand boy has joined them, pointing in her direction, his gestures frantic. What could this possibly mean? Are they detectives tracking a criminal, or is she the prey in some sinister game? Poirot's sharp eyes flickered with interest as he rose from his chair and joined Hastings at the window. A knowing smile curled at the corner of his lips. "Ah, Monsieur Hastings, how your mind leaps to dramatic conclusions. You see mystery where there is none. That is Miss Mary Marvell, the celebrated film star, and those shadows behind her. Admirers who have recognized her beauty and fame. They follow not with malice, but with awe." Hastings let out a breath, half in relief, half in disappointment. "Oh, well, I suppose that makes sense." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You have an annoying habit of turning my grand theories into something quite ordinary." Poirot merely smiled. "Non, mon ami, it is not that your theories are ordinary, it is that you, like so many others, see only the illusion. The truth lies beneath, and in this world of deception and hidden motives, the truth is often stranger than fiction." Just as he finished speaking, the unmistakable sound of the doorbell echoed through the apartment. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And now, Hastings, let us see if today brings us a mystery worthy of our time." A few moments later, the door swung open, and there, standing with a mixture of grace and urgency, was none other than Miss Mary Marvell herself. Her wide, innocent blue eyes darted between Poirot and Hastings before she spoke, her voice tinged with unease. "Mr. Poirot, I need your help. I've received letters, frightening letters, and I fear that someone is after me." She reached into her handbag and retrieved 3 envelopes, her fingers trembling as she placed them on the table. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze locking onto the envelopes with quiet intensity. "Ah," he murmured. "Now, mon ami, the real mystery begins." Which she handed to Poirot. The letter scrutinized them closely. Cheap paper, the name and address, carefully printed, "Let us see." The inside, he drew out the enclosure. I had joined him, and was leaning over his shoulder. The writing consisted of a single sentence, carefully printed like the envelope. It ran as follows: "The great diamond, which is the left eye of the god, must return, whence it came." The second letter was couched in precisely the same terms, but the third was more explicit: "You have been warned, you have not obeyed. Now the diamond will be taken from you at the full of the moon. The 2 diamonds which are the left and right eye of the god shall return. So it is written. The first letter I treated as a joke, explained Miss Marvell. When I got the second, I began to wonder. The third one came yesterday, and it seemed to me that after all the matter might be more serious than I had imagined. I see they did not come by post. These letters, no, they were left by hand by a. That is what frightens me. Why? Because it was from in San Francisco that Gregory bought the stone 3 years ago. I see, madam, that you believe the diamond referred to be the Western Star, finished Miss Marvell. That's so at the time. Gregory remembers that there was some story attached to the stone, but there wasn't handing out any information. Gregory says he seemed just scared to death, and in a mortal hurry to get rid of the thing. He only asked about 1/10 of its value. It was Greg's wedding present to me. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. The story seems of an almost unbelievable romanticism, and yet who knows? I pray of you, pasting, hand me my little almanac. I complied. Vol, said Poirot, turning the leaves. When is the date of the full moon? Friday next. That is in 3 days' time. Madam, seek my advice. I give it to you, this belle histoire may be a hoax, but it may not. Therefore I counsel you to place the diamond in my keeping, until after Friday next. Then we can take what steps we please. A slight cloud passed over the actress's face, and she replied constrainedly, I'm afraid that's impossible. You have it with you, huh? Poirot was watching her narrowly. The girl hesitated a moment, then slipped her hand into the bosom of her gown. Drawing out a long thin chain, she leaned forward, unclosing her hand. In the palm a stone of white fire, exquisitely set in platinum, lay and winked at us solemnly. Poirot drew in his breath with a long hiss. He murmured, You permit, madame? He took the jewel in his own hand, and scrutinized it keenly, then restored it to her with a little bow. Magnificent stone without a flaw. Sent on. And you carry it about with you, coma? No. I'm very careful, really. EO as a rule. It's locked up in my jewel case, and left in the hotel safe deposit. We're staying at the Magnificent, you know. I just brought it along today for you to see, and you will leave it with me. Nessa. You will be advised by Papa Poirot. Well, you see, it's this way, Poirot. On Friday we're going down to Yardley Chase, to spend a few days with Lord and Lady Yardley. Her words awoke a vague echo of remembrance in my mind. Some gossip. What was it now? A few years ago, Lord and Lady Yardley had paid a visit to the States. Rumour had it that his lordship had rather gone the pace out there, with the assistance of some lady friends. But surely there was something more, some gossip which coupled Lady Yardley's name with that of a movie star in California. Why, it came to me in a flash. Of course it was none other than Gregory B. Rolfe. I'll let you into a little secret, Muir Poirot. Miss Marvell was continuing. We've got a deal on with Lord Yardley. There's some chance of our arranging to film a play down there in his ancestral pile, at Yardley Chase. I cried, interested. Why, it's one of the show places of England. Miss Marvell nodded. I guess it's the real old feudal stuff, all right, but he wants a pretty stiff price, and of course I don't know yet whether the deal will go through. But Greg and I always like to combine business with pleasure. But I demand pardon if I am dense. Madam, surely it is possible to visit Yardley Chase without taking the diamond with you. A shrewd, hard look came into Miss Marvell's eyes, which belied their childlike appearance. She looked suddenly a good deal older. I want to wear it down there. Surely, I said. Suddenly there are some very famous jewels in the Yardley collection, large diamond amongst them. That's so, said Miss Marvell briefly. I heard Poirot murmur beneath his breath, say, come sir. Then he said aloud, with his usual uncanny luck in hitting the bull's eye, he dignifies it by the name of psychology. Then you are without doubt already acquainted with Lady Yardley, or perhaps your husband is. Gregory knew her when she was out west, 3 years ago, said Miss Marvell. She hesitated a moment, and then added abruptly, do either of you ever see society gossip? We both pleaded guilty rather shamefacedly. I ask because in this week's number there is an article on famous jewels and it's really very curious. She broke off. I rose, went to the table at the other side of the room, and returned with the paper in question in my hand. She took it from me, found the article, and began to read aloud. Amongst other famous stones, may be included, the Star of the East, a diamond in the possession of the Yardley family, an ancestor of the present Lord Yardley, brought it back with him from China, and a romantic story is said to attach to it. According to this, the stone was once the right eye of a temple god. Another diamond, exactly similar in form and size, formed the left eye, and the story goes that this jewel too would in course of time be stole. One eye shall go west, the other east, till they shall meet once more, then in triumph shall they return to the god. It is a curious coincidence that there is at the present time a stone corresponding closely in description with this one, and known as the Star of the West or the Western Star. It is the property of the celebrated film actress, Miss Mary Marvell. A comparison of the two stones would be interesting. She stopped. Epon, murmured Poirot, without doubt a romance of the first water. He turned to Mary Marvell. And you are not afraid, madame? You have no superstitious terrors. You do not fear to introduce these two Siamese twins to each other, lest a should appear, and hey presto whisk them both back to China. His tone was mocking, but I fancied that an undercurrent of seriousness lay beneath it. I don't believe that Lady Yardley's diamond is anything like as good a stone as mine, said Miss Marvell. Anyway, I'm going to see. What more Poirot would have said, I do not know, for at that moment the door flew open, and the splendid-looking man strode into the room. From his crisply curling black head to the tips of his patent leather boots, he was a hero, fit for romance. I said, I'd call round for you. Mary, said Gregory Rolfe, and here I am. Well, what does Miss Poirot say to our little problem? Just one big hoax, same as I do. Poirot smiled up at the big actor. They made a ridiculous contrast. Hoax, or no hoax, Mr. Rolfe, he said, dry. I have advised Madame your wife not to take the jewel with her to Yardley Chase on Friday. I'm with you there, sir. I've already said so to Mary, but there she's a woman through and through, and I guess she can't bear to think of another woman outshining her in the jewel line. What nonsense, Gregory said. Mary Marvell sharply, but she flushed angrily. Poirot shrugged his shoulders. Madam, I have advised I can do no more sine. He bowed them both to the door. Ah la la, he observed, returning Isam, the good husband. He hit the nail on the head. To Demham he was not tactful. Assuredly not. I imparted to him my vague remembrances, and he nodded vigorously. So I thought all the same. There is something curious underneath all this. With your permission, mon ami, I will take the air. My return, I beg of you. I shall not be long. I was half asleep in my chair when the landlady tapped on the door and put her head in it. It's another lady to see Mr. Parr. Sir, I've told her he was out, but she says as how she'll wait, seeing as she's come up from the country. Oh, show her in here, Mrs. Murchison. Perhaps I can do something for her. In another moment, the lady had been ushered in. My heart gave a leap as I recognized her. Lady Yardley's portrait had figured too often in the society papers to allow her to remain unknown. Do sit down, Lady Yardley, I said, drawing forward a chair. My friend Poirot is out, but I know for a fact that he'll be back very shortly. She thanked me, and sat down. A very different type this from Miss Mary Marvell, tall, dark, with flashing eyes and a pale, proud face, yet something wistful in the curves of the mouth. I felt a desire to rise to the occasion. Why not in Pa's presence? I have frequently felt a difficulty. I do not appear at my best, and yet there is no doubt that I too possess the deductive sense in a marked degree. I leant forward on a sudden impulse. Lady Yardley, I said, I know why you have come here. You have received blackmailing letters about the diamond. There was no doubt as to my bolt having shot her home. She stared at me, open-mouthed, all color vanished from her cheeks. You know, she gasped. How I smiled by a perfectly logical process. If Miss Marvell has had warning letters, Miss Marvell, she has been here. She has just left as I was saying. If she as the holder of one of the twin diamonds has received a mysterious series of warnings, as the holder of the other stone must necessarily have done the same. You see how simple it is. I am right, then you have received these strange communications also. For a moment she hesitated, as though in doubt, whether to trust me or not. Then she bowed her head, in assent with a little smile. That is so, she acknowledged. Were yours too left by hand? But no. They came by post. But tell me, has Miss Marvell undergone the same experience? Then I recounted to her the events of the morning. She listened attentively. It all fits in my letters are the duplicates of hers. It is true that they came by post, but there is a curious perfume impregnating them, something in the nature of joss stick that at once suggested the East to me. What does it all mean? I shook my head. That is what we must find out.
You have the letters.
With you we might learn something from the postmarks. Unfortunately I destroyed them.
You understand. At the time, I regarded it as some foolish joke. Can it be true
that some Chinese gang are really trying to recover the diamonds? It seems too incredible. We went over the facts again and again, but could get no further towards the elucidation of the mystery. At last Lady Yardley rose. I really don't think I need wait for MPUO. You can tell him all this. Can't you? Thank you so much, Mr. She hesitated, her hand outstretched. Captain Hastings, of course. How stupid of me. You're a friend of the Cavendishes, aren't you? It was Mary Cavendish who sent me to Murpio. When my friend returned, I enjoyed telling him the tale of what had occurred. During his absence, he cross-questioned me rather sharply over the details of our conversation, and I could read between the lines that he was not best pleased to have been absent. I also fancied that the dear old fellow was just the least inclined to be jealous. It had become rather a pose with him to consistently belittle my abilities, and I think he was chagrined at finding no loophole for criticism. I was secretly rather pleased with myself, though I tried to conceal the fact for fear of irritating him. In spite of his idiosyncrasies, I was deeply attached to my quaint little friend B. He said at length with a curious look on his face, "The plot develops past me. I pray you that piage on the top shelf there." He turned the leaf.
Here we are. Yardley. B.I. Count served South African War. March 19th. Autumn. Omrum. Humrum. Raw. Romrum. Humrum. 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 We are you. Humrum. 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 2 daughters. Born 19. Humrum. 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 The case. I am not acting for Miss Marvell, since she refuses to be guided by my advice. What I do now is for my own satisfaction. The satisfaction of Hercule P.D. Decidedly, I must have a finger in this pie.
And you calmly wrote Lord Yardley to dash up to town, just to suit your convenience.
You won't be pleased. Oh, if I preserve for him his family, Simon, he ought to be very grateful. Then you really think there is a chance of it being stolen? I asked eagerly. Fallen, I've certainty, replied Poirot, placidly. Everything points that way. But how Pooh stopped my eager questions with an airy gesture of the pen. Not, I pray you. Let us not confuse the mind. And observe that Pierre, how you have replaced him. See you not, that the taste books go in the top shelf, the next taste in the row beneath, and so on. Thus we have order methods, which as I have often told you, Hastings exactly, I said hastily, and put the offending volume in its proper place. Lord Yardley turned out to be a cheery, loud-voiced sportsman, with a rather red face, but with a good humor, or bonhom about him, that was distinctly attractive, and made up for any lack of mentality. Extraordinary business, this Michuo. Can't make head or tail of it seems. My wife's been getting odd kind of letters, and that this Miss Marvell had them too. What does it all mean? Quo handed him the copy of Society Gossip. First, my lord, I would ask you if these facts are substantially correct. The peer took it. His face darkened with anger as he read. Damn nonsense. He spluttered. There's never been any romantic story attaching to the diamond. It came from India. Original.
I believe I never heard of all this Chinese god stuff. Still, the stone is known as the Star of the East. Well, what if it is? He demanded wrathfully. Poirot smiled a little but made no direct reply. What I would ask you to do, my lord, is to place yourself in my hands, if you do so unreservedly. I have great hopes of averting the catastrophe. Then you think there's actually something in these wild cat tales. Will you do as I ask you? Of course I will, but do you then permit that I ask you a few questions? This affair of Yardley Chase, is it, as you say, all fixed up between you and Mr. Rowell? Oh, he told you about it. Did he know there's nothing settled? He hesitated, the brick-red color of his face deepening. Might as well get the thing straight. I've made rather an ass of myself in many ways, man Poirot, and I'm head over ears in debt, but I want to pull up. I'm fond of the kids, and I want to straighten things up and be able to live on at the old place. Gregory Rolfe is offering me big money enough to set me on my feet again. I don't want to do it. I hate the thought of all that crowd play acting around the chase, but I may have to, unless he broke off. Poirot eyed him keenly. You have then another string to your bow. Permit that I make a guess. It is to sell the Star of the East. Lord Yardley nodded. That's it. It's been in the family for some generations, but it's not entailed still. It's not the easiest thing in the world to find a purchaser. Hofburg, the hat and garden man, is on the lookout for a likely customer, but he'll have to find one soon, or it's a washout. One more question, Peer. Lady Yardley, which plan does she approve? Oh, she's bitterly opposed to my selling the jewel. You know what women are. She's all for this film. Don't I comprehend? Said Pooh. He remained a moment or so in thought, then rose briskly to his feet. You return to Yardley Chase at once. Dee say no word to anyone. To anyone, mind, but expect us there this evening. We will arrive shortly after 5. All right, but I don't see Then said Poirot kindly. You will that I preserve for you your diamond Nespa? Yes, but then do as I say. A sadly bewildered nobleman left the room. It was 5:30 when we arrived at Yardley Chase, and followed the dignified butler to the old panel hall, with its fire of blazing logs. A pretty picture met our eyes. Lady Yardley and her 2 children. The mother's proud dark head bent down over the 2 fair ones. Lord Yardley stood near, smiling down on them. Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings, announced the butler. Lady Yardley looked up with a start. Her husband came forward uncertainly, his eyes seeking instruction from Poirot. The little man was equal to the occasion. All my excuses. It is that I investigate. Still, this affair of Miss Marvell's. She comes to you on Friday, does she not? I make a little tour first to make sure that all is secure. Also, I wanted to ask of Lady Yardley if she recollected at all the postmarks on the letter she received. Lady Yardley shook her head. Regretfully. I'm afraid I don't. It is stupid of me. But you see, I never dreamt of taking them. Seriously, you'll stay the night? Said Lord Yardley. Oh my lord, I fear to incommode you. We have left our bags at the inn. That's all right. Lord Yardley had his cue. Wex send down for them. No trouble. I assure you. Poirot permitted himself to be persuaded, and sitting down by Lady Yardley began to make friends with the children. In a short time they were all romping together and had dragged me into the game. Was it those, said Poirot with a gallant little bow, as the children were removed reluctantly by a stern nurse. Lady Yardley smoothed her ruffled hair. I adore them, she said with a little catch in her voice, and they you with reason. Poirot bowed again. A dressing gong sounded and we rose to go up to our rooms. At that moment the butler entered with a telegram on a salver. which he handed to Lord Yardley. The latter tore it open with a brief word of apology. As he read it, he stiffened visibly with an ejaculation. He handed it to his wife. Then he glanced at my friend. Just a minute. MP Rowe. I feel you ought to know about this. It's from Hofburg. He thinks he's found a customer for the diamond. An American sailing for the States tomorrow. They're sending down a chap tonight to vet the stone by Joe. Though if this goes through, words failed him. Lady Yardley had turned away. She still held the telegram in her hand. I wish you wouldn't sell it, George, she said in a low voice. It's been in the family so long. She waited as though for a reply. But when none came, her face hardened. She shrugged her shoulders. I must go. And dress, I suppose. I'd better display the goods. She turned to Poirot with a slight grimace. It's one of the most hideous necklaces that was ever designed. George has always promised to have the stones reset for me. But it's never been done. She left the room half an hour later. Three were assembled in the great drawing room. Awaiting the lady, it was already a few minutes past the dinner hour. Suddenly, there was a low rustler, and Lady Yardley appeared framed in the doorway. A radiant figure in a long white shimmering dress. Round the column of her neck was a roulette of fire. She stood there with one hand just touching the necklace. Behold the sacrifice, she said, gay. Her ill humor seemed to have vanished. Wait while I turn the big light on, and you shall feast your eyes on the ugliest necklace in England. The switches were just outside the door as she stretched out her hand to them. The incredible thing happened suddenly, without any warning. Every light was extinguished. The door banged, and from the other side of it came a long-drawn, piercing woman's scream. My God, cried Lord Yardley. That was Maud's voice. What has happened? We rushed blindly for the door, cannoning into each other in the dark. Ness, it was some minutes before we could find it. What a sight met our eyes. Lady Yardley lay senseless on the marble floor, a crimson mark on her white throat, where the necklace had been wrenched from her neck as we bent over her. Uncertain for the moment whether she were dead or alive, her eyelids opened. As she whispered painfully, the side door. Lord Yardley sprang up with an oath. I accompanied him, my heart beating wildly. The side door in question was a small one in the angle of the wall, not more than a dozen yards from the scene of the tragedy. As we reached it, I gave a cry. There, just short of the threshold, lay the glittering necklace, evidently dropped by the thief in the panic of his flight. I swooped joyously down on it. Then I uttered another cry, which Lord Yardley echoed, for in the middle of the necklace was a great gap. The Star of the East was missing. That settles it, I breathed. These were no ordinary thieves. This one stone was all they wanted. But how did the fellow get in through this door? But it's always locked. I shook my head. It's not locked now. See, I pulled it open as I spoke. As I did so, something fluttered to the ground. I picked it up. It was a piece of silk, and the embroidery was unmistakable. It had been torn from a Chinaman's robe in his haste. It caught in the door, I explained. Come, hurry. He cannot have gone far as yet. But in vain we hunted and searched in the pitch darkness of the night. The thief had found it easy to make his getaway. We returned reluctantly, and Lord Yardley sent off one of the footmen post haste to fetch the police. Lady Yardley, aptly ministered to by Poirot, who is as good as a woman in these matters, was sufficiently recovered to be able to tell her story. Yeah, I was just going to turn on the other light, she said, when a man sprang on me from behind. He tore my necklace from my neck with such force that I fell headlong to the floor. As I fell, I saw him disappearing through the side door. Then I realized by the pigtail and the embroidered robe that he was a she. Stopped with a shudder. The butler reappeared. He spoke in a low voice to Lord Yardley. A gentleman from Mr. Hofburg. My lord, he says. You expect him. Good heavens, cried the distracted nobleman. "I must see him." "I suppose no, not here." Mullings in the library. I drew Poirot aside. "Look here, my dear fellow, had we better get back to London? You think so, Hastings?" "Why, well," I coughed delicately, "things haven't gone very well, have they? I mean, you tell Lord Yardley to place himself in your hands, and all will be well, and then the diamond vanishes from under your very nose." "True," said Poirot, rather crestfallen. "It was not one of my most striking triumphs." This way of describing events almost caused me to smile, but I stuck to my guns, so, having pardoned the expression, rather made a mess of things. "Don't you think it would be more graceful to leave immediately, and the dinner, the without doubt excellent dinner, that the chef of Lord Yardley has prepared?" "Oh, what's dinner?" I said impatiently. Poirot held up his hands in horror. "It is that in this country you treat the affairs gastronomic with a criminal indifference. There's another reason why we should get back to London as soon as possible," I continued. "What is that, my friend?" "The other diamond," I said, lowering my voice. "Miss Marvell's Ian." "What of it?" "Don't you see his unusual obtuseness annoyed me. What had happened to his usually keen wits? They've got one, now they'll go for the other." "Tree," cried Poirot, stepping back a pace and regarding me with admiration, "but your brain marches to a marvel, my friend. Figure to yourself that for the moment I had not thought of that, but there is plenty of time, the full of the moon. It is not until Friday." I shook my head. Dubiously, the full of the moon theory left me entirely cold. I had my way with Poirot, however, and we departed immediately, leaving behind us a note of explanation and apology for Lord Yardley. My idea was to go at once to the Magnificent, and relate to Miss Marvell what had occurred, but Poirot vetoed the plan, and insisted that the morning would be time enough. I gave in rather grudgingly. In the morning,
Oh!
seemed strangely disinclined to stir up. I began to suspect that, having made a mistake to start with, he was singularly loathed to proceed with the case. In answer to my persuasions, he pointed out with admirable common sense that as the details of the affair at Yardley Chase were already in the morning papers, the Rolls would know quite as much as we could tell them. I gave way unwillingly. Events proved my foreboding to be justified. About 2 o'clock, the telephone rang. Poirot answered it. He listened for some moments, then with a brief bilan he rang off, and turned to me. "What do you think, me?" He looked half ashamed, half excited. "The diamond of Miss Marvell. It has been stolen." "What?" I cried, springing up. "And what about
The full of the moon?"
"No." Poirot hung his head. "When did this happen?" "This morning." "I understand." I shook my head sadly. "If only you had listened to me. You see, I was right. It appears so."
Oh!
"Mummy," said Poirot cautiously. "Appearances are deceptive, they say, but it certainly appears so." As we hurried in a taxi to the Magnificent, I puzzled out the true inwardness of the scheme. That full of the moon idea was clever. The whole point of it was to get us to concentrate on the Friday, and so be off our guard beforehand. "It is a pity you did not realize that Maffa," said Poirot, Ailey, his nonchalance quite restored after its brief eclipse. "One cannot think of everything." I felt sorry for him. He did so hate failure of any kind. "Cheer up," I said, consolingly. "Better luck next time." At the Magnificent, we were ushered at once into the manager's office. Gregory Rolfe was there with 2 men from Scotland Yard. A
Feast.
clerk sat opposite them. Rolfe nodded to us as we entered. "We getting to the bottom of it," he said, "but it's almost unbelievable how the guy had the nerve. I can't think a very few minutes. Suffice to give us the facts. Mr. Ralph had gone out of the hotel at 11:15. At 11:30, a gentleman, so like him in appearance as to pass muster, entered the hotel, and demanded the jewel case from the safe deposit. He duly signed the receipt, barking carelessly as he did so. Looks a bit different from my ordinary one, but I hurt my hand getting out of the taxi. The clerk merely smiled and remarked that he saw very little difference. Rolfe laughed and said, Well, don't run me in as a crook this time anyway. I've been getting threatening letters from and the worst of it is, I look rather like a myself. It's something about the eyes. I looked at him, said the clerk, who was telling us this, and I saw at once what he meant. The eyes slanted up at the corners like an Oriental's. I'd never noticed it before. Darn it all, man, roared Gregory Rolfe, leaning forward. Do you notice it now? The man looked up at him and started. No, sir, he said. I can't say I do. And indeed there was nothing even remotely Oriental about the frank brown eyes that looked into ours. The Scotland Yard man grunted. Bold customer, thought the eyes might be not, and took the bull by the horns to disarm suspicion. He must have watched you out of the hotel, sir, and nipped in as soon as you were well away. What about the jewel case? I asked. It was found in a corridor of the hotel. Only one thing had been taken, the Western Star. We stared at each other. The whole thing was so bizarre, so unreal. Poirot hopped briskly to his feet. I have not been of much use, I fear, he said regretfully. Is it permitted to see Madame? I guess she's prostrated with the shock, explained Rolfe. Then perhaps I might have a few words alone with you. Muir, certainly in about 5 minutes. Poirot reappeared. Now, my friend, he said gay to a post office. I have to send a telegram. Who? To Lord Yardley. He discounted further inquiries by slipping his arm through mine. Come, mon ami. I know all that you feel about this miserable business. I have not distinguished myself. You in my place might have distinguished yourself. Beanon, all is admitted. Let us forget it, and have lunch. It was about 4 o'clock when we entered Pugh's rooms. A figure rose from a chair by the window. It was Lord Yardley. He looked haggard and distraught. I got your wire and came up at once. Look here, I've been round to Hofburg, and they know nothing about that man of theirs last night, or the wire, either. Do you think that Poirot held up his hand? My excuses. I sent that wire, and hired the gentleman in question. You. But why? What? The nobleman spluttered impotently. My little idea was to bring things to a head, explained Poirot placidly. Bring things to a head. Oh, my God, cried Lord Yardley. And the ruse succeeded, said Poirot cheerfully. Therefore, my lord, I have much pleasure in returning you this. With a dramatic gesture, he produced a glittering object. It was a great diamond, the Star of the East. Gasped Lord Yardley, his face pale with astonishment. But I don't understand. No, said Poirot, his sharp eyes gleaming with satisfaction. It makes no matter. Believe me, it was necessary for the diamond to be stolen. I promised you that it should be preserved to you, and I have kept my word. You must permit me to keep my little secret. Poirot's lips curled into a knowing smile. Convey, I beg of you, the assurances of my deepest respect to Lady Yardley, and tell her how pleased I am to be able to restore her jewel to her. Lord Yardley blinked, his mind still struggling to catch up with the rapid unraveling of events. Poirot, the little man with his impeccable manner, had once again turned an impossible situation into a masterstroke of deduction. The nobleman stammered his thanks, as Poirot, ever the gentleman, ushered him out with a flourish. As soon as the door clicked shut, Poirot turned back to me, gently rubbing his hands together with glee. Poirot, I said hesitantly, still trying to piece it all together. Am I quite demented, or mon? No, mon ami, he interjected with a chuckle, but you are as always, in a mental fog. I frowned. Then tell me, how did you get the diamond from Mr. Rolfe? Poirot's expression turned smug. Ah, Monsieur Hastings, the warning letters, the article in Society Gossip, they all sprang from the ingenious mind of Mr. Gregory Rolfe himself. I stared at him, utterly baffled. Rolfe, but why would he? Poirot raised a finger. Patience, Hastings. Let us go back. The two diamonds said to be miraculously alike. Ah, but they did not exist. He tapped his temple. There was only ever one diamond, my friend, originally part of the Yardley collection, and for 3 years it had been in the possession of none other than Mr. Gregory Rolfe. He stole it. But, I began, my mind whirling. Poirot's eyes twinkled with amusement. This morning, with a touch of grease paint at the corner of each eye, he transformed himself yet again. I'd see him. Must see him on the film. He is indeed an
artist, n'est-ce pas?
Poirot's amusement faded, and his voice turned grave. He played a dangerous game, mon ami, and he almost won. But why would he steal his own diamond? I asked, still struggling to grasp the full picture. For many reasons, Hastings. To begin with, Lady Yardley was growing restless. In California, she had been left much alone. Her husband, Lord Yardley, was amusing himself elsewhere, and Gregory Rolfe, oh, he was very charming, very handsome, and very businesslike. Poirot's expression darkened. He made love to Lady Yardley, and then he blackmailed her. I gasped. Blackmailed? Poirot nodded. I confronted the lady with the truth the other night, terrified by the threat of scandal, the possibility of divorce, and worst of all, the fear of being separated from her children. She agreed to everything he demanded. She had no money of her own, Hastings. She had no choice but to permit him to substitute a paste replica for the real stone. She was trapped. I felt a chill creep down my spine. So the diamond was never with the Yardleys at all. Poirot wagged a finger. Ah, but it was, for a time. But when Rolfe learned that the Yardleys were considering selling the diamond, the substitution would be discovered. Lady Yardley, desperate, wrote frantically to Gregory Rolfe, who had just arrived in England. And what did our charming film star do? He soothed her, promised to handle everything, and planned the most brilliant deception, stealing the diamond all over again. I exhaled sharply. So, in staging the robbery, he kept Lady Yardley quiet. Poirot finished smoothly. A woman in fear can be unpredictable, and Rolfe could not risk her confessing the truth. He ensured the robbery appeared genuine, securing not only the diamond, but also the hefty insurance payout of £50,000. Poirot tapped his nose. And of course he still had the diamond. I slumped back, overwhelmed. A double robbery. A deception within a deception. But Poirot, how did you figure it all out? Poirot's chest puffed out with satisfaction. Hastings, my dear friend, I see not with my eyes, but with my mind. The moment I heard of the supposed twin diamonds, I knew. There are no such perfect coincidences in the world of Hercule Poirot. And so, I acted. I played the game, mon ami, and as always, I won. He leaned back, folding his hands, his expression one of utter triumph. I could only shake my head in wonder, as once again the genius of Poirot had unraveled a web of lies with nothing but sheer intellect, and an unshakable belief in the power of the truth. The web of deception, a diamond's dark secret. The grand halls of Yardley Manor echoed with Lady Yardley's desperate scream, sending a chilling shudder through the night. Servants rushed to her chamber, finding her pale trembling, pointing towards the open French doors. The diamond, it's gone, she gasped, eyes wild with terror. Lord Yardley arrived breathless, the flickering candlelight casting jagged shadows on his distressed face. The family heirloom, the Star of the East, one of the most exquisite diamonds in existence, had vanished. But what truly unsettled him was not just the theft, it was the calculated precision with which it had been executed. The world was quick to react. The robbery made headlines, whispers spread, and Scotland Yard took up the case. Yet amidst all the chaos, one man remained curiously unshaken. Hercule Poirot, the little Belgian detective, with his ever-calculating mind, twirled his mustache as he surveyed the situation with a knowing smile. A perfect illusion. As the investigation unfolded, Poirot quickly unraveled the real crime beneath the spectacle. Lady Yardley had orchestrated the entire event. The truth was far more twisted than a mere theft. Before switching off the lights, Lady Yardley had ripped the diamond from the necklace herself using a pair of pliers. The sudden darkness, the bang of the door, the sound of something clattering down the passage, these were mere theatrics, carefully staged to sell the illusion of a daring heist. By the time the lights flickered back on, the precious heirloom was already hidden away. But mon ami, I objected, eyes wide with disbelief. We saw the necklace around her neck. Poirot smirked, ever so smug. Ah, my dear Hastings, that is where le petit détail makes all the difference. Her hand strategically placed, concealed the broken part where the diamond once sat. the mastermind in the shadows, yet the real danger lurked beyond Lady Yardley's act of desperation. Gregory Rolfe, a charming and cunning manipulator, was the unseen puppeteer behind the scenes. Years ago, while Lady Yardley was alone in California, he had ensnared her in a dangerous game of romance and blackmail. Rolfe wasn't just a smooth talker, he was a predator, a man who knew precisely how to exploit a woman's fears. Love letters, exchanged in innocence, had become instruments of control. He threatened to twist her words, to scandalize her name, and to destroy her life. Faced with no way out, Lady Yardley had allowed him to replace the real diamond with a flawless paste replica. For 3 years her secret remained intact, until now, when she heard that the diamond might be sold. Panic struck her heart. The truth would be revealed, so she staged the theft to erase the past and eliminate the risk of discovery. But then, I hesitated, my mind racing. If Lady Yardley already had the diamond, why did Rolfe steal it again? Poirot leaned back, his sharp eyes glinting. Because, mon ami, there was never a second diamond at all. The great deception, the so-called miraculous twin diamonds, were nothing more than a grand illusion, crafted by none other than Gregory Rolfe himself. There was only ever one Star of the East. For years Rolfe had been hoarding the real gem, leading Lady Yardley to believe she still had control. Now, with an insurance payout of $50,000 at stake, he executed his own deception, stealing back the diamond from himself to ensure he walked away, both wealthy and untouched. But how did you get him to confess? I asked, my curiosity reaching its peak. Poirot grinned. Simple, mon ami. I told him that Lady Yardley had revealed everything, that legal proceedings were about to commence, and of course I added a few more little lies for dramatic effect. Rolfe, despite all his cunning, crumbled under pressure. Within hours, he surrendered the diamond, desperate to escape the noose tightening around him. A game of smoke and mirrors. As the case closed, one detail still nagged at me. Mary Marvell, the famous actress, had come seeking Poirot's help, fearing that she too was entangled in the mystery of the stolen diamond. But in truth she was merely a pawn in someone else's game. Poor woman, I muttered. She lost her diamond through no fault of her own. Poirot chuckled, utterly unsympathetic. Oh mon ami, she has gained something far more valuable, the greatest advertisement of her career. The world will now forever associate her with mystery and intrigue. She has lost nothing. I remained unconvinced. My faith in human nature remained intact, even as Poirot dismissed the complexities of emotion. But then, one final realization struck me. You knew all along, didn't you? I asked, eyes narrowing. Poirot gave a small, almost mischievous bow. Mais oui, mon cher Hastings, but I could not deny you your fun. And with that, the brilliant little man walked off, leaving me fuming, frustrated, and though I'd never admit it, in absolute awe.